It is better for you to leave first and to set up a soft landing for your other immediate friends and family.
I'm just going to say it because nobody else is saying it, even though we're all thinking it. The American dream is to leave America.
Nearly 9 million Americans have left the country. And if there were a new state called Expatland, it would probably be more populous than Vermont, Wyoming, and Alaska combined. After all, what made citizens of the world's richest nation, once hailed as the land of the American dream, choose to leave their own homeland? Let's look at the small details in life. A supermarket bill for almost $300 for just 1 week of groceries. A retired couple has to count every penny to pay for health insurance that costs as much as their rent. A family in Chicago is teaching their children how to duck when they hear gunshots, instead of how to cross the street. This is no one else's business. This is our story. And if nearly 9 million Americans have left, perhaps it's time to ask again. Is staying in America still the right choice? And are we the next ones to pack our bags? Let's start exploring. Going to the supermarket is so expensive now. Before, I used to fill the trunk with groceries, but now there's only enough room to put them on the passenger seat. I just saw 2 bottles of juice for $9. The price is ridiculous. It's no longer a secret. Many Americans are complaining about rising food prices. And it's not just a subjective feeling anymore. According to the latest Consumer Price Index, CPI, the cost of shopping at supermarkets has continued to rise to nearly 330 points. This is the largest increase since 2016. The American dream, which used to be a full dinner, has now become a joke on the bill. Bananas are 50 this year compared to 38 last year. Coffee has increased by up to 40% in a year and is now priced at $8.99. Ground beef is currently priced at $7.67, while a year ago it was only $6.77. Everything is so expensive that many Americans have to cut out a meal a day. It's no coincidence that 52% of Americans believe living abroad would be cheaper and of higher quality. They don't talk in theory. They looked at the wallet. They compare. In Mexico or Costa Rica, a family can live comfortably on 50–60% of the cost compared to the US. For some ones a month, you can rent a bright apartment and eat at restaurants a few times a week. In the US, that same amount of money would barely cover your health insurance. A woman shared, "Every time I go to the supermarket, it costs at least $300, and my energy bill has increased by 70%. I earn more money than before, but I have less left at the end of the month because all my expenses have increased." In Tampa, to live comfortably, you need to earn $111,000 a year, which is unimaginable for most of my friends. Many people, after trying, finally decided decisively, we're leaving. For family life, for the children, for safety and happiness. They prepared their immigration documents, researched thoroughly, and compared the cost of staying versus starting over elsewhere. A musician said, "I used to play music 4 to 5 times a week, which was enough to live on and save. Now the income is higher, but it's still not enough to cover expenses. Inflation, housing prices, utilities, food, everything is suffocating. I don't see a future here anymore." What I find most paradoxical is that America always prides itself on being the world's #1 economy, yet ordinary workers feel like they're losing right on their home turf. When medical bills are higher than rent, when beef becomes a luxury, people start to look beyond borders. In the US, retirement in 2025 no longer means retiring, but seems to mean retiring from steak to oatmeal, a lifetime upgrade for a lifetime of dedication. In your opinion, is this just a temporary blip, or a sign that the American dream is cracking from within the kitchen? What do you think, with the money you have now, would you choose a simple dinner in the US or a full seafood meal in Mexico? And remember, the cost is just the surface. There's another nightmare that makes many Americans want to leave, even before they reach retirement age. The United States spends more on healthcare than any other country on the planet. Over $2,500 per person per year, double the OECD average. At first glance, this sounds like a health paradise. But the irony is this: Americans are the people who are most afraid of going to the doctor. From 2000 to 2019, global healthcare spending reached $8.5 trillion, equivalent to nearly 10% of the world's GDP. But in the US alone, that number is even more staggering. 20% of GDP, meaning for every dollar spent, 20 cents goes to healthcare. Americans pay twice as much as people in other wealthy countries. But the results are not at all proportionate. Every time they go to the doctor, instead of asking, "Can my illness be cured?" Americans ask, "Can I afford this bill?" For an emergency visit that only requires a light bandage, the bill can be $3,000 and $5,000 if insurance doesn't cover it. Entering the hospital is like entering a casino. You don't know what you'll come out with, your health, or a bill that's half the price of a car. Not stopping there, many people are frustrated by the way the American healthcare system is operating. Some people even quipped, "Going to the hospital in the US is like stepping into a casino. You don't know what you'll come out with, your health or a bill worth half a car." It's no surprise that over 650,000 Americans admit they want to move abroad to receive better social security benefits. They weren't looking for beautiful beaches, but for cheap hospitals. In Canada, Spain, or Thailand, they know that just by showing their ID card, not a credit card, they will be treated. Many people are realizing that the healthcare system in the US no longer seems designed to cure illness, but rather to generate more profit. Doctor, hospital, insurance. It all revolves around the question, who will pay, rather than how the patient will recover. One person commented frankly, "In America, everything has to turn a profit. Every step adds money. Healthcare shouldn't be a way to generate massive profits. But in America, we're all walking dollar signs." A man in Texas recounted, "In America, I had excruciating stomach pain and immediately thought, do I have enough money to go to the hospital? Meanwhile, in Costa Rica, I just thought, will I get better?" See? In America, physical pain is sometimes less significant than the worry about hospital bills. A figure that startled me: 51% delayed or skipped treatment due to cost. For households with an income below $40,000 per year, this rate rises to 63%. That means they accept sacrificing their health to have enough money to live on. Ironically, healthcare, which should be a basic human right. But in the US, it's become a brutal trade-off between health and pocketbook. Will this system ever truly heal instead of just inflicting more wounds? The question for you is, if you spend your whole life working and paying taxes, but when you get sick, you have to count every penny like a gambler at a roulette table, do you think staying in America is still worth it? We have seen that money and health have stifled the American dream. But this is only one piece of the puzzle. Because even if you have enough money, there's something else that makes many Americans decide to leave. The feeling of safety right here on this land. In many countries, the common fear of people when they go out is rising gas prices or traffic jams. However, in America now, the familiar worry that many people carry in their hearts, whether their children will come home safely after school. According to the 2024 Global Peace Index, North America is the region with the sharpest decline in safety levels. And we all know the reason. There are more guns and bullets than people. Violent crime, social conflict. All of this sometimes makes the land of the free seem more like the land of the fearful. And perhaps the cold numbers don't tell the whole story. But imagine, you're in Chicago or Houston, and every morning you tell your child that if they hear gunshots, they should duck under the table instead of remembering to look for red lights when crossing the street. Meanwhile, an American family who moved to Lisbon shared, "Here, I don't have to teach my children how to hide when they hear strange noises. I just taught it how to cross the street." The same worry about being a parent, but in completely different contexts. Now, Americans are leaving not just for money, but because they feel abandoned in their own homes. They see security as becoming a personal responsibility rather than a system. You have to buy and find ways to protect your home yourself, buy cameras yourself, choose safer schools yourself. In fact, many people believe they must leave the US to find peace. Reality shows that there are increasingly large American communities in Europe and Asia. In Hong Kong, despite political instability, 20% of Americans there have left in 2 years. But many others still choose to stay because they feel safer there than in some cities in the US. It sounds paradoxical, but it's the real choice of thousands of families. Some parents even recite, "Home of the brave." As long as you're brave enough to send your child to school every morning, like a mantra. That's a truth many parents live with, but rarely put into words. And the question for us is, if a country cannot make its citizens feel safe, even in their homes and schools, then what is the point of money, jobs, or flowery slogans? Safety is the most basic need. When that foundation is shaken, everything else, dreams, freedom, opportunities, is just ink on an advertisement. But that's not all. Because there's another deeper reason why thousands of Americans not only want to live elsewhere, but even want to escape the control of their own homeland. Taxes and administrative procedures that bind citizens for life. Did you know? As a US citizen, you have to file global taxes, even if you're sipping cocktails in Bali or have lived in Switzerland for 20 years without setting foot in the US once. That's right. You can leave America, but America will never leave you. It all started with FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act of 2010. Just hearing the name sounds complicated, but the meaning is simple. Any American citizen, no matter where they live, still has to file taxes with Uncle Sam. Banks around the world are also forced to report your accounts to the IRS. In other words, a US passport is not just a golden ticket for travel, but also a financial chain. What are the consequences? Each year, approximately 5,000 people officially renounce their US citizenship. In 2020 alone, this figure nearly reached 6,000, a record. This is called the expatriation list, a public table in the Federal Register where the names of those who dare to say goodbye to America are printed bluntly like a manifesto. The story sounds far away, but in reality, it's very close. A technology engineer in Switzerland once said he had to hire a private tax lawyer at a cost of $10,000 per year just to handle IRS paperwork, even though all of his income was earned outside the US. Finally, he sighed, "I love America, but I can't love the IRS," a saying that is both humorous and heartbreaking. The truth is, Americans don't hate paying taxes. They hate the feeling of being treated like lifelong suspects. They feel they have to prove their innocence to the government every year, that those bank accounts, salaries, and savings are not fraudulent activities. When you live abroad but are still so bound, the feeling is, "I've left. Why are they still clinging to me?" Ironically, in the US, Uncle Sam not only wants you to work yourself to death, but also wants you to file taxes, even if you die in another country. For many, a US passport is increasingly like a crown of thorns, glamorous to display, but heavy to wear. So, more and more people are choosing the extreme but liberating path, renouncing their citizenship. It's not because they hate America, but because they want to live like normal human beings, not as IRS mobile taxable assets. If you work your whole life, you have to pay taxes, of course. But even after you leave, you still have to work hard on endless paperwork and obligations. Do you feel truly free? But this isn't the final reason. Because alongside the tax burden, a new trend is exploding, and it's making the dream of leaving easier than ever: remote work and digital nomad visas. You can sit in a Lisbon seaside cafe, listen to the waves crashing, sip espresso, but your bank account will still be dinging with your salary from a company in New York. That's no longer a pipe dream. It's becoming the choice of millions of Americans. According to the 2025 NBER study, 25% of paid workdays in the US are still remote. This number is no longer booming like during the pandemic, but it has stabilized as a new standard of living. This means that for every 4 days of work, 1 day Americans work outside the office. And with the internet, that day could be in Texas or in Thailand. This aligns with a global trend. Over 40 countries have opened digital nomad visas, special permits that allow workers to live in their country but work for a company elsewhere. Here's another piece of data. 17% of Americans say they want to go abroad in the next 5 years. Put all the pieces together and you'll see an irreversible trend. Migration is no longer just for the wealthy or retirees, but for ordinary office workers as well. Americans have realized they don't need to leave their jobs to leave America. Previously, migration meant sacrificing one's career. Now, with just a laptop and Wi-Fi, you can work abroad even while sitting on your sofa in Mexico. While coding, you can save half the cost of health insurance. A 50-year-old programmer in Florida did just that. Moved to Oaxaca, Mexico. The rent here is only half the cost of my old health insurance. So, who would be crazy if they didn't do that? The American dream is no longer on Main Street. It drifted to Da Nang, Barcelona, and Oaxaca. Americans find the American dream when they leave America. And this also explains why nearly 9 million Americans left. It's not just an escape from costs, healthcare, or safety. It's also an upgrade, leveraging technology and globalization to live better with the same work. Here's a question for you. If you could live in a safer, more affordable country while still earning your regular US salary, would you choose to stay or go? But this isn't the final stop, because there's an even more extreme option, when just leaving isn't enough. Many Americans have chosen to completely renounce their American citizenship. Imagine you're willing to stand in line, not to apply for a visa, not to gain new citizenship, but to renounce the citizenship of the country you were born in. Sounds like a nightmare. And yet, thousands of Americans did just that. According to a list published in the Federal Register, nearly 4,800 people officially renounced their US citizenship in 2024 alone. That number isn't large compared to a population of 330 million, but think about it. These are people who signed a paper telling the government directly, "I'd rather lose my American passport than keep it." Why did it come to that? It's not because they don't love America anymore. On the contrary, most of them are people who were once attached and proud. But it's the invisible things: burdensome taxes, complicated banking procedures, complex paperwork, that turn a US passport from a golden ticket into a straitjacket. No matter where they went or what they did, they were treated as suspects who had to explain themselves. Many international banks are outright refusing to open accounts for US citizens, fearing trouble with the IRS. A Singaporean businessman once said, "I renounce my American citizenship, not because I hate America, but because America doesn't give me the freedom to work like a normal person." That's the hidden insight. Americans don't leave because they lack patriotism. They leave because they feel trapped even when living on the other side of the world. America considers itself a symbol of freedom. But in the eyes of many citizens abroad, true freedom only begins when they return their American passports. In other words, for them, the American dream only returns when they are officially no longer American. Doesn't that sound bitter? A nation once admired by the world for its opportunities is now witnessing its own citizens seeking their final escape by abandoning their identities. And here's the big question for all of us. When the loyal, the successful, those who have the means to choose, also decide to leave, who will keep the American dream alive? The American dream. In the past, it was the suburban home, the car in the driveway, a full dinner, and a sense of peace. But today, for millions of Americans, that dream is shrinking into an empty grocery bill, a bottle of medicine that costs as much as rent, and fear that echoes right outside the schoolhouse door. Nearly 9 million American citizens have left. They're not just looking for cheaper costs or more comfortable healthcare. They are seeking what should have been readily available in their own homeland: safety, respect, and an opportunity for a decent life. Is this just a temporary wave of migration or a sign that America is losing its very soul? What do you think? If you had the opportunity, would you stay, or would you seek a different life beyond the borders? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories and perspectives. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss deeper analyses of American economics, politics, and society. The content in this video is based on public sources, surveys, and statistics. This is not financial, legal, or medical advice. The purpose of the video is to analyze and discuss, aiming to broaden perspectives, rather than to promote or encourage any specific migration action. All personal decisions should be carefully considered and appropriate experts consulted. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.